For this problem, we're asked to find the solutions for x where y is 6 on the sinusoid. And so we're looking for these four x values. To start, I need to find an equation that models the sinusoid. So I'm going to start by drawing in my sinusoidal axis, and I'm going to treat this as cosine. So I can see that my lowest point is at -3, and my highest point is at +7. And so overall, the height is 10, which means that my amplitude is going to be 5. So I'm going to draw in my sinusoidal axis right in between my max and min, which would be 5 units away from both. And so my sinusoidal axis occurs at y equals 2. And again, that helps us see that our amplitude is going to be 5. From here, I need to find the period. So I'm going to take a peek at this maximum to this maximum, and I can see that between the two is 20 units. And so that tells me the period is 20 radians. The last thing that I need to find is the horizontal shift. And so again, following this maximum point, it's normally occurring on the y-axis, but it's shifted to the right 6 units. So now using all of these 4 transformations, I'm going to write my equation for cosine. And so right away my amplitude is 5, so that number will be multiplied in front of cosine. The period is 20 radians. Normally it is 2 pi radians, and so that could reduce down to 10 pi. You don't have to reduce it, but you can. So in the equation, I'm going to write in the reciprocal, which is pi over 10. From here, I'm going to use an x variable. Since we are in radians, I need to shift it to the right 6. So we will subtract 6. And then last, my sinusoidal axis has been shifted up 2, so we will have +2. Before I'm going to start to solve it algebraically, I have graphed both my cosine curve and the line y equals 6. And so what this will allow me to do is take estimates from my graph. So after I've adjusted the window, I can see the 4 points that I'm looking for, and you could do a trace feature to then estimate some of these values. And so this first one looks to be around 8. This next one appears to be around 4. And so then I could find these other 2 by adding 20 to each of them. And so it's always a good idea to look at the graph first, get an idea of what reasonable answers are going to be. So to solve it algebraically, I'm going to take my equation and set it equal to 6. And so I will have 5 cosine pi over 10 times x minus 6 plus 2, and that's going to equal 6. And so keep in mind, my goal is to find 2 points, and we've been calling those a circle and a square just to help us decipher between the two. I want to find this point, which will then help me find this point, because I know that they're going to be 20 radians apart. I then also want to find this point. We were calling that the circle point, and once I find this point, again, I can find another one by adding 20 radians to it. And so this equation, we're going to find general solutions, which will then help me find all 4. So right away, I'm going to take care of the easy stuff, and I'm going to subtract 2. So I will be left with 5 cosine of pi over 10 times x minus 6 equals 4. Again, next I'm going to take care of the easy stuff on the outside, so I'm going to divide both sides by 5. So I will have the cosine of pi over 10 times x minus 6 equals 4/5. Now from here, we learned that the inverse of a function that's called a circular function is going to be arc cosine. So I'm going to take arc cosine of both sides of the equation. And so I'll have the arc cosine of the cosine of pi over 10 times x minus 6. That'll be equal to the arc cosine of 4 over 5. From here, what makes this nice is that the arc cosine and the cosine are inverses of each other, so they're going to cancel, and I'm left with pi over 10 times x minus 6. That will be equal to, and we're going to use the definition for arc cosine. I know that when I think about the parent function of cosine, that it is an even function, and then whenever I get one answer out of my calculator, the same answer but negative will also be a solution. Once we have these two unique answers, I can add and subtract multiples of 2 pi to get the rest. So the definition of arc cosine is going to be plus or minus cosine inverse of 4/5, since that's our ratio, plus 2 pi n. Now from here, I need to get x alone, and so I'm going to do that by first multiplying by the reciprocal of pi over 10. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 10 over pi. Do the same thing over here. So now these are going to cancel, and I'm left with x minus 6. I need to distribute this 10 over pi to both the inverse cosine and to the 2 pi n. So I'm going to have plus or minus 10 over pi cosine inverse of 4/5. And the nice thing here is the pi's are going to cancel, and I'm going to be left with 20n. Now note that our period is 20. And so this should make perfect sense that once we get my two starting points, the circle and the square, I'm going to add multiples of 20 to get more. So my last step then is to add 6 to both sides. And I'm going to keep the 6 grouped with this part right here, since this is a number I'm going to find in my calculator. So I will have my general solution is x equals 6 plus or minus 10 over pi times the cosine inverse of 4/5 plus 20n. So again, take note that this right here is going to represent my starting points, where this right here is just multiples of the period, how I'll get more answers. So now I'm going to go to my calculator, and I will get 6 plus, I'm only going to type in one of the answers right now, so 6 plus, I'm going to use alpha y equals to organize this in my calculator clearly, 10 over pi. Make sure you're using the pi button and not 3.14. Multiply that by cosine inverse, and keep in mind this is all done in radian mode, 4 over 5, and that gives me about 8-ish. And if you remember when we were first looking at the graph on our calculator, we did estimate this point to be roughly 8. And so I just found a circle solution is approximately equal to 8.048. And I could find more of these answers by adding 20n. I'm going to look for that square solution by now doing the same thing, but now I'm going to have 6 minus. So you can just grab your previous answer, change that plus sign to a minus sign, and we will get about 3.952. And again, if you remember when we traced, this looks like about 4. And we just found a square solution is approximately equal to 3.952, and again plus 20n. So my general answers, this is my exact general answer, and then these two are my approximate general answers and how I'm going to find these other two solutions. So right now, I know that my answers to answer this problem are going to be 3.952, 8.048, and now I'm going to add 20 to each of those to get more. So I'm going to add 20 to the 3.95. I'm going to take this answer up here, add 20 to that as well. So my other two answers are 23.952 and 28.048. These are my final answers. These are the 4 solutions in which my x values give us an output of 6.